There we go, recording in progress. So, good morning and welcome to this morning's webinar. We're following yesterday's World Menopause Day. Today, we're going to be talking about menopause in the workplace. Now, obviously, yesterday was a day of awareness, a day of lots of stuff in the media drawing attention to this issue. But unfortunately, unlike World Menopause Day, women don't just experience menopause for that 24 hours. And in fact, you may be shocked to realize that actually it could be as long as 10 years that women are experiencing the symptoms of peri-menopause, the menopause itself, which is actually a moment in time, and then the kind of post-menopause stuff that then creeps up. So it isn't a 24-hour overnight sensation as World Menopause Day was. It's very much an ongoing issue. And it's my pleasure to welcome you here this morning and share with you some information that I hope will help you, whether you are an individual on this journey, whether you are the partner, spouse working alongside somebody who's dealing with this, or whether you are a conscientious employer, manager, leader who wants to make sure that you're making a positive difference to your workplace. You're very welcome to today's session. My name's Andrea Newton, and I'd like to start off today's session by just sharing with you a little story and see if any of you identify with this. Once upon a time, there was an intelligent, independent, capable, competent, self-employed businesswoman who went to do her weekly shop at Morrison's. She managed to negotiate Market Street with its fresh fruit and veg. She even got through bread, tinned product. She got through detergent, washing up liquid. And her trolley was starting to fill. But then she got to the dog food aisle. And unfortunately, on that day, there were no chicken fillet dog chews. She searched high and low, just in case somebody had chosen them and put them back in the wrong place, just in case they'd got hidden behind another alternative dog treat. But there were no chicken fillet dog chews. And all of a sudden, completely from nowhere, this massive feeling of panic overwhelmed her. And there she stood, unsure of why she was feeling the way she was feeling, just knowing that she couldn't get what she wanted to get. And actually, what was it that she'd wanted to get? And all of a sudden, the panic, the overwhelm, the stress kicked in, and she had to abandon her shopping trolley and flee and have a good old weep in the car. Now, chances are the chicken fillet dog chews, or rather lack of them, probably wasn't worth that drama. And she had no idea where those feelings of panic, of overwhelm, of complete anxiety had come from. She was, although embarrassed, relieved that it had happened in Morris, rather than when she'd stood up on the stage to deliver a keynote speech to 300 people in the construction industry. She was relieved at least for that small mercy. But what if that had happened when she'd got a little bit stressed about something at work, when she'd been running a training workshop, when she'd been delivering a webinar by Zoom? Just imagine how that might have felt. But thankfully, she only had to make an apology to Morrison's and not an auditorium full of an audience. And it was only a couple of weeks later that, talking through what had happened with her GP, amongst other symptoms that seemed to have cropped up too, that they were able to put two and two together and work out that this intelligent, independent, self-sufficient, self-employed, gobby northern bird was actually dealing with perimenopausal symptoms. And it's fair to say that her knowledge and understanding of peri-menopause was fairly limited, as is the case with most women and lots of health professionals. She knew about the hot flushes and the night sweats that people joked about, and people joked about them, so it can't be that big a deal. But she kind of knew about that stuff, and that wasn't happening. So clearly, she wasn't menopausal. What she didn't know, and has only since learned, is that the perimenopause has 34 symptoms associated with it. And some of those symptoms are quite scary. Some of them sound like they ought to be in Jurassic Park. But things that range from joint pain. I say joint pain, it's a bit like having your knee banged with a hammer on a fairly regular basis. Things like memory loss. There you go. There's a typical example. What was I going to say? It was on the tip of my tongue. Things like your teeth being affected, your gums, a tingling sensation in your mouth, itchiness on your skin. So many different symptoms that actually, once we understand what we're dealing with, we start to put two and two together and realize that that's absolutely where we are. Now, let's be honest, not every woman will have those challenges. In fact, some women will sail through it without even a blip. I personally have a belief that your general health and well-being prior to those years basically will determine just how easily or not you'll sail through it. Because for me, the menopause absolutely completely exposed and exaggerated prior health conditions that I'd had. And again, when I went on to learn more, to do my training so that I could deliver events like this, what I learned was, even though stereotypically we do the whole hot flushes, night sweats, bloated feeling, the menopause is actually when the body starts to produce less estrogen. And estrogen, the hormone, actually plays a part in over 300 bodily functions. So the imbalance of estrogen will perhaps have a knock-on effect on the cortisol hormone. As you know, cortisol is associated with stress and panic. Estrogen will also have an impact on collagen, so the stuff that kind of makes your skin healthy and bouncy and all of that good stuff. Estrogen impacts over 300 bodily functions. And if you are not aware what's happening to you, it can be a really scary place to be. In fact, some women have said they actually thought they were going mad. The itchiness, the scalp, the dry mouth, the panic for no apparent reason. And one lady I spoke to told me that she felt compelled to drive her car off a viaduct. She had no idea where that feeling came from, but she had to fight it until she could get herself safe. So we know that that hormonal imbalance affects every single one of our systems. If you think about it, it's that chain reaction. I always want to burst into Diana Ross here, but that chain reaction that if one thing is perhaps not working properly, or it's in overdrive, or it's not producing enough, it has a knock-on effect, because we know every single one of our systems is connected. And as soon as we start to realize the sheer impact of this, it kind of makes it easier for us to understand what's going on and perhaps why. But for the women in the workplace, and by the way, it's estimated that women over the age of 50 are the fastest growing demographic in the UK workforce. So this isn't going to be a small number of people who are affected. But what we know is 50% of those women will experience depression. That whole hormonal shift has been shown to increase the risk of depression, anxiety, even suicide ideation. 37% of women report that increase in anxiety. 72% say they feel unsupported by their organisation, and 90% feel they could never have the conversation with their line manager about what's going on. And therefore, if they do take time off sick, which actually 1 in 50 women will be long-term sick because of the menopause, only 25% of those women would actually feel comfortable to reveal to their employer the reason for their absence, because there's still very much embarrassment and stigma that sits around the menopause. 90% of organisations surveyed said they had no specific support for women going through the menopause, despite the fact that 25% of women will experience quite severe and debilitating symptoms. So when we start to look at statistics like that, and we start to understand the impact that menopause and that decline in estrogen has for a woman, it kind of makes sense that as an employer, we want to be doing our bit. And that's the work that I'm looking to do. My name's Andrea Newton, and for the last 20 years, I've worked with organisations across all industry sectors, from television to the NHS, from local government to waste management. And I'm a woman on a mission to get organisations talking about things that we don't talk about often enough. I host a podcast which is called Really Useful Conversations That Change Organisations, because I believe that conversations can change organisations, develop relationships, increase results, improve performance. Conversations can even save lives. I'm also a tutor with the National Centre for Suicide Prevention Training. And again, my interest in the impact of menopause came when I learned that the hormonal imbalance increases the risk of menopausal women having thoughts of suicide. So you can see how all of my planets have collided. And having been the woman in Morrison's, if you hadn't guessed, I decided it was time to bring those really useful conversations even more to the fore and offer my clients an opportunity for individuals within their organisations to understand the menopause better for themselves as women going through it, but also so that men within the organisation, managers, leaders, HR professionals could also understand and realise what role they needed to have when it comes to supporting women. And so here we are today, the day after World Menopause Day, sharing with you information that I hope will enable you to start some really useful conversations in your workplace. Recognising that we need to create an environment where people can talk without shame or embarrassment about what's happening to them, and where managers can confidently conduct return to work interviews or raise concern about the well-being of a member of their team, or address the fact that perhaps performance, attendance has dipped, if indeed menopause is the underlying reason for that, and be confident to have a conversation about it. I also want to create more conversations so that women can ask for the help they need. The number of employment tribunals citing menopause as a reason has actually trebled over the last couple of years. So women are getting more vocal about objecting to the way in which they've been managed or perhaps not supported. And at the moment, the law is a little bit inconsistent because in some cases, it's judged it as a sex discrimination matter because, as you know, sex discrimination can only be women because of the menopause. But other cases, they've also looked at it under disability discrimination. And again, for those of you qualified in that area, you'll know that disability is basically any condition that significantly impacts an individual on a day-to-day basis for a substantial period of time, which, if you remember what I said in my introduction, for some women could be severe debilitating symptoms, and in some cases, symptoms that they experience for almost 10 years or more in extreme cases. Because what we've not yet touched on is the fact that some women will experience what we call a surgically induced menopause. So perhaps women who have to have a hysterectomy or other surgery for health reasons, perhaps women that go through certain treatments for certain cancers because of the medication and the chemotherapy and the treatment. Some women can have the menopause surgically induced at a much younger age. And in fact, a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to a lady in her late 20s who was experiencing menopausal symptoms. So we need to have conversations that matter. We need to step away from our stereotypical limited view of what this is and the difference it makes. And we need to appreciate, some of these numbers, especially if you are a conscientious employer. 11% of menopausal women have said they didn't put themselves forward for promotion because of how they were feeling at that time in their lives. That's the potential of a woman not having that kind of full career opportunity. That's the risk that organisation doesn't get the best person for the job. 30% of women say they actually had to take time off sick because of menopausal symptoms, but as many as 1 in 4 wouldn't admit that that was the reason for it. 29% of women say they significantly lost self-confidence going through the menopause. They started to doubt themselves. Now, you can imagine if you're a career woman in a position of responsibility, if you suddenly start to have a dip in self-confidence, start to question your capability, that can be a massive issue. 41% of women described being forgetful or having memory loss to the point that it led to them making mistakes at work. And again, not feeling supported, not feeling able to talk about it, you can imagine the downward spiral and the impact that would have. 58% of women say they actually felt more stressed as a result of the menopause. And therefore, 52% said they were less patient with colleagues, co-workers, and customers. So imagine the impact on your business, imagine the impact on your team, if indeed a woman is struggling but unable to have a conversation and perhaps get the support that she really needs. All in all, 80% of menopausal women said that their working life was negatively affected by this life stage. And let's be clear, this is a stage that every woman at some point will go through. And actually, it's estimated that by this time next year, women of a certain age will actually be 1 in 6 of every workforce. So we're not just talking about a handful of women being affected by a handful of issues. We're talking about something that can be fairly significant and that should matter to you as a conscientious employer. Now, if we look at the menopause years, and actually, as I suggested earlier, the perimenopause, which is the build up to it when symptoms first start happening, that can be typically over a 10-year period, 45 to 55. And the average age for the menopause, the point at which periods stop, in the UK is age 51. So 1 in 6 of women in the UK workforce will fall into that age bracket this time next year. And what we know from all the research that's been done so far is that as many as 1 in 4 women will actually consider quitting their job as a result of their menopausal symptoms. Perhaps because of the memory loss, perhaps because of the loss in self-confidence, perhaps because they feel tetchy, perhaps because they just can't sleep at night and in the morning feel really crap. All of those things roll together. You can start to understand why women of a certain age may actually think about leaving the workplace completely. The stress is just too much. And we've not even touched on some of the physical symptoms that can be very significant during this time. For example, women may experience irregular periods, may experience quite heavy flooding. Imagine the embarrassment of having to deal with that in a workplace where there weren't adequate facilities or where it was an issue that nobody ever talked about. Things like uniforms, do they fit well because a woman's shape will change? The material that they're made from, will that aggravate the body's challenge at controlling temperature during this phase? There's so many things that potentially could negatively impact. And that means that organizations all over the country are at risk of losing experience, talent, and expertise. And, you know, right now, where there's so much in the media about the great attrition, people resigning and leaving because COVID has given them, you know, different thoughts and feelings and views. Imagine adding to that the loss of the experience and expertise of women between the ages of 45 and 55, who have probably by that time acquired a significant amount of knowledge, capability, that organizations risk losing. And actually, when we talk to women in the workplace, the TUC did quite a significant piece of research looking at what were the issues that did most concern women. And certainly, as a woman, if you are looking for employment, employers want to be able to attract, recruit, and retain talent. And therefore, your reputation as an employer, your reputation as an employer of choice, are you somebody that actively, proudly encourages that climate of diversity and inclusion? And so women do have concerns around this and will look to employers who are loud and proud in the way that they support them, whether that's family-friendly policies, whether that's the menopause specifically, whatever it may be. You know, let's not be foolish. Let's acknowledge that today people are looking for quite different things in terms of an employer, their career, their life of work. And so if you want to be up there as one of those employers of choice, it kind of makes sense that you'd be looking at this. And it doesn't have to be major. Research that's done around women experiencing menopause in the workplace said that actually things like the hot flushes, the night sweats, they were just something that they expected. There's lots of different remedies and treatments out there. But actually, in the research that was done, it was the cognitive impact of menopause that women were most concerned about. Those things that I've mentioned to you earlier, those feelings of, am I going mad? Am I losing my mind? Things like the increased risk of depression, anxiety, lack of self-confidence, even suicide ideation. Those are the things that came out as priorities in that research with regards to the concerns that women have in the workplace. And there's lots of things that organizations can be doing to create a climate where actually women do feel supported. You know, if you want to do the right thing and be known as that employer of choice, if you want to not only retain the talent that you currently have, but be able to attract and recruit more, especially in today's competitive world, there's lots of things that you will want to do. And, you know, those things don't have to be massively costly. They don't need to have huge investment. At a very basic level, it's about education. And I'm sorry, no employer has an excuse anymore. There is so much information out there freely available that actually ignorance is not an excuse. And if anybody's interested, I can give you a direct link to 16 hours of free training that people can tap into to better understand. And on that same offer, there's also a facility for men who perhaps want to understand it better as a partner or spouse or colleague at work. So please do ask me if you want to look at some of that free stuff. And please go to the website as soon as we finish today's webinar and make sure that you download your free guide from there. confidentconversations.co.uk/menopause. And what you'll find there is a download of information that summarises some of the things I've talked about today, but that hopefully will also give you some food for thought in terms of what you need to do to stay ahead of the game. Because let's be honest, simple, reasonable adjustments, you wouldn't fail to do that for any other health condition. If you'd got somebody who perhaps wore a hearing aid, or you'd got somebody who was returning after surgery, you understand your duty of care as an employer, and you would make those simple, reasonable adjustments. And those are the things that we need to be looking at for women in today's workplace, whether it's something as simple as having a fan on the desk, whether it's making sure that there are decent facilities that women can use if they need to get away for a moment or two. And just recognising the little things that can go a long way. I mentioned the free training that's available. Some of you may have seen recently that I've become a brand license holder with menopause experts. I wanted to be able to offer information and support to my clients that was absolutely of good quality. And so I've been and got myself trained and invested and learned. And on the Menopause Experts website, if you look for the training section, you can sign up, get your own account and work through the material completely free of charge at your own pace. You can jump about, you can look at a session on hormones, you can look at how changing your diet can help. There's so much information there. And that's why I've decided to partner with the Menopause Experts so that under their umbrella, I can offer quality information and advice and consultancy to my clients. So there's some free resources. There really is no excuse for ignorance, no excuse for people to say that they didn't know. There's so much information out there. You just need to want to find out. And as an employer, there are simple things that you can start doing to really make a difference in this area. First and foremost is dealing with the stigma that sits around it. Make it okay to have conversations of this nature. Clearly, nobody needs depth and detail, but if 25% of women who go off sick don't feel able to say that they're off sick due to their menopausal symptoms, how can you ever support them? You can't support what you don't know about. And if you don't know about it because people are afraid to talk about it, you've got to do some work on the culture in your business. We've got to make it okay. And it may be that the first step is to introduce a policy. And that way you give everybody clarity. Women understand what support's available, what they can expect, how they can expect to be treated. And managers and leaders will have a guide to use if they have a female in their team who's struggling. If you go to the Really Useful Conversations podcast, you'll find the last 2 episodes have talked specifically about the menopause and the introduction of such policies with a case study from a current client of mine. So please do download. Again, it's free. It's information that's worth having. And then you can start to think about the appropriate support that women might need, the reasonable adjustments, whether it is temperature, whether it's flexible working, whether it's a fan on the desk, whatever it might be, reasonable adjustments. Nobody's asking you to bend over backwards and completely redesign the workplace. It's making those reasonable adjustments that you would be prepared to make, that you would expect to make under your duty of care as an employer. And then education, training, information, so that not only are women aware of what to expect and perhaps what's going on for them. As I say, don't get caught up in Morrison's looking for those dog chews because you will think you're going mad. So let's learn more about it as individuals. Let's take more responsibility for our health and well-being. And as an employer, you can help women do that easily. You can also train your managers so that they feel confident to have conversations that matter. And obviously that's an area that I can absolutely help you with, whether you've got managers that you want to do some one-to-one coaching with, or whether you want me to deliver a group training session to better inform and equip your managers. That's definitely something that I, and let's be honest, lots of other people could help you with. And let's make sure that the menopause is as much part of your health and safety commitment as every other issue. Health and safety and employee relations, legislation that's in place to protect the health and well-being of people in the workplace, to prevent discriminatory behaviour, and to ensure that individuals are treated fairly and get the support that they need and deserve. And that's the bit that we need to make part of our culture. And again, that's not just around menopause. As I'm sure you're aware, I do a lot of work in the mental health arena. I encourage employers to create a climate where mental health and well-being is on the agenda. And as I mentioned earlier, I also work in the field of suicide ideation. So on a daily basis, I'm talking about issues like this. And organisations need to create a climate where people can talk honestly and openly about it without fear of stigma or embarrassment or ridicule or any of those terrible jokes. So I hope today has given you some food for thought. And I hope it started to inspire you to think about how you can create a more menopause-friendly environment, maintain your reputation as a decent employer, and looking forward to be able to attract, recruit, and retain the talent that you have. Because at the end of the day, if women of that age are going to represent as many as 1 in 6 of the workforce next year, surely it's something that you need to start paying more attention to. Start with the policy, be clear about what you want to commit to, what you want to offer, what you want to deliver, what you want to achieve. And something like that is an excellent place to start, but it is only the start. You know as well as I do, you could have the very best policy in the whole wide world, but if you haven't got people capable of delivering it, working within it, adapting things around it, that policy becomes immediately devalued. So that is just the first step. According to CIPD, 900,000 women in the UK left their jobs because of menopausal symptoms. Left unsupported, women will be leaving at the peak of their experience and will impact productivity, which is globally said to be a cost of around $150 billion to the workforce. Massive numbers. And I just hope that this has given you a sense of some of the practical things that you can be doing. I'm not one for candles and sandals. People that know me know that I don't do beanbags, lycra and tofu. I'm a very practical, down-to-earth, no-nonsense, gobby northern bird who, having gone through some of these challenges myself, made it my business to find out more, teamed up with the Menopause Experts Group. I'm a woman on a mission. And if you think that I can help you in that regard, please do drop me a note. But please do be aware, as I said, I can point you to lots of free online training that's a self-study option. But I can also offer you training for your managers. And I can also offer you a lunch and learn experience, whether that's for individuals or indeed for your leadership population. There really is no excuse to make a positive difference. So if you're ready to do some really useful work, I'd love to hear from you. Please do get in touch. And don't forget to go to the website, confidentconversations.co.uk/menopause, and download your free guide. I hope it's been useful, and thank you for your time.